be talking to you about how to create, read histograms and frequency tables. Before we get too far into it, let's just explain to you really quickly what they are. A histogram is simply a data distribution, and it's represented on a chart similar to a bar graph. The only difference between a histogram and a bar graph is that the bars are pushed together so that they are connected from one interval to the next. A frequency table is basically a table that organizes the data that you would eventually put into a histogram. And it basically is showing multiple events through frequencies. And the intervals, an interval is a set range of numbers used to create a frequency table. So an interval could be numbers from 0 to 9, then 10 to 19, and so on and so forth. And then you're going to take that information that you have and put it into these intervals based on the values that you have. So we're going to show you how to do that and read that as we move through here, taking a look at a couple of examples. This is an example of a histogram, and many times you will have to take a histogram such as this and create a frequency table from it. And this typically is going to be quite simple because all the information you're looking at on the histogram is going to go directly into your frequency table. A frequency table is very similar to a XY chart or an input-output chart, also known as a T-table. So I'm going to show you here. We're going to put time on the left here, and then we'll put frequency on the right as we create our table. Oops, back up there. And that basically is also representing your X and Y values that are along your histogram. You can see frequency right over here would be representing your Y values, and time representing your X values. Alright, so we're just going to split that just like a T-table here and start writing in our information. So we're going to write on the left the time, which you can see is already broken into the intervals that I spoke of before. You can see the time in minutes is broken into 0 to 19 minutes, 20 to 29 minutes, and so on and so forth down the line. And this is basically time spent by students studying math. So we're going to write those in under the time column here. So that's 0 to 19, then 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, and then finally 50 to 59. And now at this point we can draw some lines here separating out our intervals. Like I said, it ultimately just looks like your typical T-table. And then you go and read your histogram and determine where those frequencies are for each time interval. The first time interval is 0 to 19 minutes. So we're going to look at our table here, and I'll just kind of mark what we're looking at. That blue area there is representing your 0 to 19 minutes. So we're going to read that and determine as we flow up the table here, we can see that it stops at 45. So there are 45 students, and we can go ahead and write that in. In some cases with frequency tables also, they're referred to as tally charts. Now when you have 45 that you're doing or using, you're not going to want to have to tally out 45. So in this case you can actually just write it out numerically. But there are such things called frequency tally charts as well that you may see along the way, and they use just simply tally marks or tick marks instead of just writing out the number. The second values we're going to be looking at are the 20 to 29 range. You can see that on this table it goes all the way up to 60. Alright, so we're going to go and write 60 from 20 to 29. 30 to 39, you can see it goes to 30. 40 to 49 goes all the way up to 45 again. And then finally 50 to 59 is one of our lower ones here. It looks like it's right down there at 15. And that's how you take and transform a histogram into a frequency table using those time intervals or any intervals at the bottom of the table. Alright, so let's take a look at another example here. Alright, now we're going to be looking at a frequency table, and we're going to be taking the information from the frequency table and putting it into a histogram. So you can see again all the information is in the table that you'll need. You just need to know where to place your frequency and where to place your intervals on the actual graph, and it's not going to be any different from what we just saw a moment ago. You're going to always place your frequencies along the y-axis. Alright, so I'll just mark that with an F, make sure I have enough room here, and then your age intervals will go on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and number out my y-axis though really quickly. I think the best, you pretty much have to determine based on the numbers that you have what would be the best interval, or I guess numbering system to use. You can do by 2s, by 5s, by 10s, even by 15s if need be. Since we have values that range from, it looks like 12 to 35, our best choice here probably would just be to go ahead and number by, in this case, probably by 10s. To make sure we have enough room. But it really isn't that big of a deal. You just don't want to spread it out too far, and you don't want it to be too close together, because again, it becomes a room issue determined by what you're using to do your math on. So I'm going to go ahead and number up the side here by 10. All the way up till I get to 40, and I would need to make sure that I go all the way to 40 because the largest number I have is 35. So again, just numbering to 30 isn't going to be quite enough. So you see that we get a good 4 spaced increment up the left side. You could have also probably have gotten away with doing it by 5s if need be, if you wanted to be possibly a little bit more accurate. And that's the only difference you're going to see, is the accuracy there. So at the bottom, those are our frequencies, and at the bottom we're going to put our age intervals. Alright, and I'm going to do those vertically to save a little room here as well. So my first interval is going to be 10 to 19. The second one will be 20 to 29. Then we'll do 30 to 39. 40 to 49. And then lastly 50 to 59. Alright, and now again, when you're doing a histogram, the difference between a histogram and a bar graph, because they are very similar, is that you need to make sure that your bars actually connect, because these intervals are connecting along the way. And they want that represented in the data display. So in this case, our first age interval is 10 to 19. So we need to determine approximately where 12 is on our y-axis. So again, our y-axis being right here. Alright, we need to look and determine about where 12 is. Well, I can tell that 12 is going to be right above 10. So, and usually you're going to want to use different colors for this. So I'm going to go in and just choose color here, something a little different, and just mark right above 10 and draw a line straight over. Okay, straight over and then straight down. And you can even write in there 12 if you'd like. It's not necessary. You can color it in. That's all really determined by what your teacher would really want you to do. Those are all options, however. The next one, 20 to 29, is going to go take us to 15, which will be a little bit above where we just marked that. So 15, I would say, would be about right here. I'm just going to draw a line over and down. Alright, but keep in mind you do have to connect here. So I'm going to draw that down, connecting with my other line. If you want to draw it connecting all the way down like so, you can do that as well. That's fine. As long as they connect, that's really what they're going to want to see. Alright, the next one being 25. We need to take that about halfway between 20 and 30. Alright, so halfway between 20 and 30 is about right there. So I'm going to mark that and kind of come over and draw a line over to the right and then down again. Make sure to connect those. Let me fix that just a bit. And here we go. We have our 3 of our bars, and then the next one will be our 40 to 49, which is going to be 35. So again, right in between 30 and 40 at this point. So let's go ahead and choose. Let me choose a new color here, a little lighter blue. In between 30 and 40 is going to be about right there. So again, I'll draw a line over and then straight down as best I can, connecting those. And then the last one takes us back down just a bit to 28. So 28 is going to be right below 30. Again, I'll just mark that to show you right below 30. That's probably appropriate right there. So we're going to kind of come over and draw a line right off of the last one we did and straight down. And that'll end our histogram there. And ultimately, as you can see, all you're really doing is taking the information directly from that table and just applying it almost into what appears to be a connected bar graph, because that's exactly what it is. So your main decisions here become how to number the y-axis, which I did by tens. If you have enough room, I would have probably suggested doing it by fives, but that's fine. And then also keeping in mind that your intervals always go on the bottom of your histogram, and the frequencies always go on the left side or the y-axis. So again, the intervals along the x-axis, the frequencies along the y. Okay. All right. So let's look at another example here, and this time they're not giving us any information to start with other than a list of numbers. And you can see they give you a little scenario here. Teachers recorded the number of minutes spent grading papers. So these would be the values that we would place into intervals, okay, because it's the different values that we'll use to place along the bottom part of our histogram. This wants us to then create the intervals, which we'll do in a moment, and make a histogram. It also wants us to create a frequency table as well as the histogram for the data. So the first thing we're going to want to do here typically is go ahead and order our numbers from least to greatest or greatest to least. I usually just do least to greatest. And many things in math are going to require you to do that when you're dealing with a lot of numbers, and it also just allows you to keep everything organized. So the first thing we'll do is go through and number these. So 15 is our first value. All right, 15, and it looks like the next one's going to be appears to be 25, and then we have another 25. I'm just marking them off as I go so that I don't repeat or forget, as I tend to do sometimes. It's easy to make mistakes when you're dealing with a large list of numbers. And the next one here looks to be 30. Then 35. All right, then 45. The next one will be 2 50s. All right, and then we have, looks to be 60, 65, 72, and 74. All right, good. So again, the reason why we do that is because we want to make sure that all numbers are accounted for first and foremost, and then it's going to help us also put together our frequency table that we'll do first. The reason why it's going to help us put together our frequency table is because we have to come up with those intervals first. So our table again is going to be listed almost as a T-chart. So let me go ahead and get that started. All right, so on the left side, which is our x-axis, we'll have our age interval. I'll just put age. And then on the right side, we're going to have our frequency. Just kind of abbreviate that. All right, so now we'll go through and we'll figure out exactly what type of intervals we're going to be dealing with here. And to do that, what you have to do is figure out your range of values. So you can see part of the reason why we listed them from least to greatest is because, again, if you forgot, the range is your largest value minus your smallest value. It's the difference between those two. So we're going to take 74 and subtract 15 to figure out what we're dealing with here. So when we do that math, we're going to end up with, it looks to be 59 numbers. So we're basically dealing with approximately 60 numbers, which means the easiest thing to do is to probably break this down, since it's 60 numbers approximately, is to break this down probably by tens, because 10 goes into 60 6 times, and that'll give us 6 intervals. So let me go ahead then, and we'll typically start our intervals with our smallest value, so we'll use 15 first. All right. So our first interval will be 10 numbers, since we broke them into tens. It's going to be 15 all the way to, that's going to be 24. All right, now I know that it may seem like 9 numbers, but again, if you count them out, you'll figure out pretty quickly that 15 to 24 actually involves 10 numbers. So the next one then is going to be just a continuation from that, 24. The next number would then be 25. So you're going to do the exact same thing from 25 to 34. So the next age interval will be 25. then 35 to 44. And then it's a continuation from there. 45 to 54, and 55 to 64, and then 65 to 74. All right, and that gives us everything we need at this point. And now, one of the things we need to make sure to go do now is determine how many of these values, 15 through 74, will actually fall within these intervals. Okay, so these intervals actually being the time intervals, I should say, time spent. So 15 to 74, we're going to start with 15 to 24. How many of these times fall within that range? So 15 to 24, it looks like just one. So we can just go ahead and put a 1 there. If you want to separate it with a line, you can. 25 to 34, and again, I'm just counting. Notice there was only one value there, 15, that fell within that range of numbers. So the next one is going to be 25 to 34. So there's 1, 2, 3 numbers that fall between 25 and 34. So 3. All right, 35 to 44. There's going to be 1 again, just 35. 45 to 54, so there's 1, 2, 3. 55 to 64, that's going to be 1 again. And then 65 to 74, you can see we have 1, 2, 3 values. 3 values. So now what we'll do is we'll use our frequency table here to go and then create our histogram. Okay. Alright, now we're just moving over to a fresh page now, and you can see that there's our frequency table that we just created. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take that information and, as we did before, apply it to an actual histogram. So to create your histogram, again, you need an X and a Y axis, and we're going to go ahead and create that real quick here. Alright, and a reminder that your frequencies go along the Y-axis side, and they typically are going to want you to mark that somehow, so I'm just going to mark it with an F. And then you have to determine again how to number that up the left side of your graph. This time it'll be a bit easier because we actually are dealing with the same 2 numbers. I would just go ahead and number 1 to 5. So I'm going to notch that out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all the way up at the top. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then on the bottom you will have your frequency, or excuse me, your intervals, which were minutes. Minutes spent grading papers. Alright, so at this point then we need to go ahead and squeeze in our intervals at the bottom, and I'm going to do it in a very similar way that I did before. Just try to do them vertically so I don't run out of room. So 15 to 24. Then 25 to 34. The next one will be 35 to 44. And 45 to 54. And 55 to 64. And then lastly 65 to 74. Just enough room to make it work. Alright, so then again, at this point, if you're doing this for some type of project or just in particular, you're usually going to want to separate these out. Since these bars come together, you're probably going to separate them out by color. So the first one here, it doesn't really matter obviously what colors you choose, anything like that. So the first one, 15 to 24, goes to 1. So we can pretty easily mark that off here. And again, you're just drawing the bar as close to the next one as possible because the bars will connect. The next one, 25 to 34, will go to 3. So we'll need to change and go up to 3, which will approximately be, and one thing I will do is I'll actually start, if it's a lower bar that you're going from to a larger bar, is start on the corner of that bar and just draw straight up to your value and then over again, and that can help in creating that second bar so that they don't overlap too much or look silly. The next one is going to be back to 1. Alright, so 1 again is approximately right there. Draw that over. And then the next one is back to 3. We're just kind of jumping up and down. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw straight up from that lower bar up to 3 and over. And again, it's not all about accuracy, really. You just get as close as you can so that we can basically just look at the histogram and determine what's happening with the data. 55 to 64, again, drops back down to 1. Alright, that's going to be right here. And then lastly, we have 65 to 74, back up to 3 again, which we'll just do in brown again. Draw straight up and then over and down to complete your histogram. So at this point, again, now you're able to look at the data, all of these times that teachers spent grading, and you can see that there's a lot of fluctuation to it. So really, by reading this histogram, you can determine that in some cases, maybe by number of students, maybe by subject, some teachers spend more time grading than others. And ultimately, that's all we're wanting to see from a histogram. This has been Histograms and Frequency Tables. Thank you for joining me.